in the racing world, there's not a lot of African American drivers, but there's not a whole lot of like drivers with disabilities either, particularly when it comes to autism. So like from there, we had something to where, like we had something unique that we could grasp on that could give us the motivation to, never give up and just keep grinding, keep working, because like someday it will be possible.
Welcome to Adulting on the Spectrum. In this podcast, we want to highlight the real voices of autistic adults, not just inspirational stories, but, people like us talking about their day-to-day life. Basically, we want to give a voice to a variety of autistic people. I'm Eileen Lamb, an autistic author and photographer, and I co-host this podcast with Andrew Komarow. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Eileen. I'm Andrew Komarow, an autistic entrepreneur, co-host of this podcast, and world-renowned turtle speed racer. Like the Ninja Turtles, but faster. Today, our guest is Armani Williams. Armani is a professional stock car driver. He competes in NASCAR and was diagnosed with autism at age 2. As his career with NASCAR flourished, he wanted to raise awareness for autism and ensuring that other kids who maybe felt weird or out of place would know that they had a place in this world. So Armani, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all having me. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, I'd like that. Have you listened to our podcast before?
No. So like by the time I met Eileen just a few weeks ago, like I heard about this podcast that you guys are doing. And when I got word that y'all wanted to invite me on here, like I wanted to jump in an opportunity to, get to talk with you all. So, now that we're doing it tonight, I'm just excited to be on. It's just everything with autism. It's like I could just almost relate and just think back to, how my life's been with autism, and just be able to have those conversations, have those connections, so it's always great. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So we like to start off by asking each guest how they prefer to identify. So we mean autistic, Asperger's, on the spectrum, I don't care. And we like to just ask also because we have a tally going to see what's the most popular. So do you have a preference? And if so, what is it?
Well, like I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, but like I've kind of liked the meaning of autistic, so I kind of like to go with that. So
okay, cool. Thank you.
You're
Fair
welcome.
enough. And so speaking of autism, that's why we're here today. Can you tell us about your autism diagnosis journey, when you were diagnosed, what you remember of that process, if anything?
Well, I will say, like, I was diagnosed with autism at 2 years old. So just even from the start, I'm not going to remember what I was doing at like 2 or 3 years old. Like I'm 23 right now. But I will say like there was these experience that I was going through, especially through school, like I was always like, this kid that never really talked a lot, was kind of like, the shy guy, around the building, just trying to like understand my surroundings, what I was dealing with, things of that nature, how I was going to handle it, things of that nature. And I think like the most important thing I wanted to get out of it, like especially going through my school years, was just being able to try and make as many friends as possible, because like, it was just, it was hard to just live through life being, lonely and all that. Like, I have a great family that's always been supportive and believing in me and whatever I take my journey in. But like I never had siblings to start off with when I was born, up until I was like 12 or 13 years old, so it's just like I was always trying to make as many connections as possible. And so like I started to get this feeling that like no matter how many kids my age that I would talk to, I could just never like be able to socialize with them or communicate with them in a way that I wanted to. And I always kind of figured, why exactly is that? Is there something weird with me? Is there something that I'm not doing right and all that? And like, believe me, like I'm just a kid. So like I have absolutely no recollection that I have autism at this point. I'm thinking I'm just like, this normal kid who's just, different in a way, like everybody else is, right? But more and more it just became a little bit more stressful for me, and so like I needed to know why. And so by the time I got to about like my when I was starting in middle school, that's when, my parents decided that it was time to get up in front of me and tell me what exactly I've been dealing with. And they told me that, hey, you have autism, and that you were diagnosed at a very early age at when you were 2 years old. And so from that point I sort of understood what I was dealing with. I understood that some of the experiences that I was going through school years and the challenges that I felt that I was dealing with, I understood why now. And then from that point I wanted to research. I wanted to be able to do more research on autism as much as I possibly can to understand the challenges and to understand what kind of help can I get, how can I overcome these obstacles. But even living through autism, like life always goes on. And at some point I needed to make something out of myself, and, one way that helped me with that was, is that I loved cars. And I always would get like a bunch of these Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars and just, play with them at my parents' house and my grandparents' house. And, that was just a way in which it kept me interested. It kept me happy because it's something that I enjoy. And then I heard about, something called NASCAR, and I felt, you know what, this is even cool. I got to check this out. And so, after watching my first NASCAR race on TV, I was hooked. And from there on, I wanted to watch NASCAR every single week. And that love became a passion. It was a way for me to not even think about autism that much and my limitations, and understand that like, hey, this racing stuff is not only that I love, that I'm passionate about. Like, this is something that I need to get involved in. This is something that, I want to grow up doing, and so
I think
told my
that's
dad.
really like, no, I mean, that's really awesome. That's a good example of like one of the strengths of autism, right? Is having a special interest, having something you love to do, right? Sometimes that's seen as a negative. Sometimes maybe it can be, but for the most part, should be, encouraged. I do have a question that you were mentioning earlier. And that was, so when your parents told you about autism, right? And that you were autistic, I think that's something. Can you share how they did it? Anything you liked or appreciated, and anything maybe that wish had been done differently? I was diagnosed as an adult. Eileen was diagnosed as an adult. We didn't have our parents tell us that we were, but I think that's something where, it's a hard subject, I mean, to bring up or to mention. So do you have any tips for, maybe a parent wanting to tell their kid that they're a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way it was handled for me is that I think my parents, given that I was a kid, wanted to make sure that I was trying to enjoy life as much as possible. And that I think to them, they felt like if they told it to me like as early as they did to me, that, I would feel like almost down on myself and like not knowing what to do and all that. I think like as I grew up and I became a little bit more mature and I could understand a little bit of things, that's when like my parents felt like it was the right time to tell me. And I really appreciated their honest and transparency with me, that they were watching from afar of like the things I was doing that to me, I didn't realize what I was doing, and that from them telling me from what they saw afar, it helped me to kind of understand what exactly I've been dealing with. What were these challenges that, I was going through, and like, is this not something that I gotta let it get in my head and, keep going in life. I got to find a way to overcome that adversity. Right. So I think with all that, I think like if I had any advice for any parents, it's just really, to me, it's just, whenever that a right time and that right moments comes, whenever you feel like, your child's ready to know exactly what he's been dealing with, just be as honest and transparent to them as possible, and be able to explain what exactly they've seen from afar of like the things you're doing, so that, you can be able to get help sooner. You can be able to get help like as soon as possible. So that way you don't have to keep dealing with this the rest of your life. And so like that would be one advice I would give to parents, is just, wait for the right time, the right moment, to where, they can be able to understand it a lot better. And that way, they know what kind of help they need.
That's good advice. I have two kids on the spectrum. One of them is nonverbal, like very severe behaviors, but the other one is, I want to say like us, he's, level 1. He has less challenges, and he, totally able to have conversations, very, very able to have conversations. And we were wondering with his dad, like when is the best time to tell him, and we got advice from a psychologist, and what she said was like, just tell him. Very simply, your brain works a little bit differently, and this is why you're good at this. This is why you struggle with that. And, really like, don't make a big deal out of it, right? It's not anything, like the more you make a big deal out of it, the more it's gonna make your child feel like, oh, like I'm different, and maybe like they're gonna start like second guessing it, but really it's simple. So I love the way you explain that. On to our next question, Armani. So, as you know by now, because we've met a couple of times before, I'm a big F1 fan, and I don't know much about NASCAR, I admit, but I'm wondering like how you got into racing like professionally, because it's a lot of kids' dreams, like you talked about, but like how did you make it? Like what was the first time like you got in a car and you were like, I want to do this, for a living, and how did you make it?
Yeah, I mean, like kind of like what I explained before, but I'll go even further. There were times where, my mom or dad, we would go to, some amusement park somewhere, just to have some fun and all that. And to me, if I ever saw a go-karting attraction that they had over there, that'd be the first thing I would want to go do, even if I wasn't tall enough to be able to drive it myself. I just wanted to get that feeling of just being in a car and just like act like I'm going racing, So like it was just one of the key things to where, I started to grasp that love and passion for racing, and that I wanted to be able to do it someday. And so like I told my dad at like 8 years old, while we're watching a race, that, I wanted to be a professional race car driver. And, we didn't know exactly how this racing stuff went. I mean, my family never grew up racing anything. But I will say, like, my great grandfather, he owned an auto body shop in Detroit, and with cars comes mechanics. So like they knew that kind of part of it, but not actually racing. So it's just like, I think over time, we had to learn along the way about the racing world, and like, how to keep climbing that ladder to get to where we wanted to be. Always try to talk to like a lot of people we can talk to, and just tell them about my story and like what goals that I'm trying to accomplish, and I think being in a unique position that like in the racing world, there's not a lot of African American drivers, but there's not a whole lot of like drivers with disabilities either, particularly when it comes to autism. So like from there, we had something to where, like we had something unique that we could grasp on, that could give us the motivation to, never give up and just keep grinding, keep working, because like someday it will be possible, and the fact that, after like, racing for 15, 16 years. So, I can say that I'm driving in NASCAR and all that. Everything that I would dream of as a kid, it's just it's just been a dream come true. And, it's just, I never would have thought it'd be possible without the support of my parents and, the people that always believed in me, always thought that I could be successful, and now that I'm here and, right now I'm trying to take every advantage of it whatsoever, because this is stuff that's rare in racing, and so, I want to be able to be as successful at it as possible.
No, that was awesome. So I have going back to NASCAR. So here's what I know. Eileen likes F1. And in NASCAR, you make left turns. Okay, got that down. For those who don't know, for like me, can you tell us a little? I seriously know nothing else other than that. Can you tell us about what's the difference between F1 and NASCAR? I know that must sound like a really dumb question.
Well, no, not really. I mean, I've watched a little bit of F1, one of my favorite drivers from the F1 is Lewis Hamilton, and my dad always joked that me and Lewis Hamilton almost look alike per se, so ever since that day I always cheered for Lewis Hamilton every time I watched the F1 race. But I will say the difference between, say, NASCAR and F1 is, like you mentioned, the tracks that we race on. Like in NASCAR, we race on a lot of ovals where you're just making left turns lap after lap after lap, and we'll run some road courses that turn left and right, but not a ton. Whereas with F1, there's road courses from all over the world that they race on, no ovals whatsoever, but I will say, the vehicles that, we as drivers in NASCAR have to drive versus what it is in F1 is totally different. With F1, it's the open wheels, and the cars are not necessarily heavy. They're pretty light, so you can pretty much maneuver around, especially with how fast those cars are going. They got, 700, 800 horsepower, but they need to have the maneuverability to turn left and right, so with a lighter car, it could do that. Whereas with NASCAR, our cars weigh 3,400 pounds. We can't maneuver as easy as a F1 car, so us drivers, we're always inside a cockpit, even on a hot day racing out there, just muscling the car as much as you can, because it's just the car doesn't maneuver as easy, so whenever you commit to a line, whenever you commit to the brake and the gas, that's just your one move and that's it. And you got to try and figure out how to make it work, and so just as far as vehicles and the style of racing, it's definitely a 180 difference between the two.
It's making me want to check out NASCAR. I probably should now that I live in America. I feel like that's, I feel like NASCAR is the American thing, and F1. I mean, I grew up in France, in Europe, and F1 was so big there. And it's only making its way to the US, I feel like, since the Netflix show Drive to Survive. But yeah, I definitely will check out NASCAR. I'm kind of excited now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and what part of what made me want to, I should have added this as well. Part of me that wanted to watch F1 a little bit more was my dad told me about this other documentary with Ayrton Senna called Senna, and it's a credible documentary of probably one of the greatest F1 drivers, to ever race a car. And, it's just hearing about a story and what F1 was really like at the time. It's just, it made me want to watch it a little bit more, so that's kind of how I wanted to, see F1 races more after watching stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a great documentary. And I mean, yeah, Senna, I was very young when he passed away, but still, I remember that's a very sad destiny he had. And honestly, watching those races from back in the days wasn't even that long ago, all things considered. But the cars are so different now from then.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
just even 6-7 years ago. Now, we have the halo for protection. I mean, when I say we, I mean F1 drivers.
Yeah.
Things like that. Things are changing so fast in these sports, and it's really cool. Uh, I was wondering, and that's not a question I even had planned for you, but like, when you get into like, let's say NASCAR, because that's what you're in, do you have to learn about like mechanics, like how the car works? Like, do you understand like how the car works from the inside? Like, if that makes sense, like, do you have to learn all about the car itself?
Well, as a race car driver, you want to learn a little bit about the mechanics, but I think you want to learn more about the behavior of the car, just how exactly this car goes, like how does it move, things of that nature, because every race car is going to be different, no matter which you go in. You get to, lighter, faster cars, and then you get to, heavy cars to even faster cars. So they're going to behave like a certain way. I will say, as far as like, learning how to work the steering wheel, gas pedal, and brakes, like I kind of already knew that from like my times of going to the go-kart attraction. So like I kind of knew that part spot on. So like, having to do that in competition wasn't really like a big hurdle for me. Like I think once I got into, bigger cars to where, I had to shift, basically go through the gears, that was a interesting learning process that I had to go through, because beforehand, like I raced go-karts and, bandolero type cars, and we never had to shift whatsoever. You just press on the gas and go. Whereas, in the real time, like there's a lot of work you had to do in the car. You got a clutch, you got gears, and,
Right.
when you reach a certain RPM, you got to know like when exactly to, get up a gear or get down a gear, so it's just those are stuff that like I had to try and learn, especially because like before I had to go through that, my dad decided that I should go to, a driving school to where they teach you how to shift. And so that's kind of how I first started learning how to do it. And then to try to apply it to racing, eventually I started figuring out the gist and like the steps on what to do, and from there it just became a lot easier, so like as a race car driver, like it's more about learning the behavior of the car, what exactly you have to do inside the cockpit, than more so learning the entire mechanics of the car. That's why
Right.
you got that's why you got teams of engineers that can, understand all that stuff. But as a race car driver, you want to learn a little bit more about it. So at least you know what you're feeling inside the car. So
That makes sense.
yeah.
And did you have to overcome like any stereotypes with driving, anything related to your autism or not? Like, do you have any funny stories or situation where like things didn't go as planned and like how you handled it?
Wow, that's a good question. But I will say with like, autism, because we have this special ability to be laser like focused on things that interest us, I don't think it wasn't really much of a stereotype or much of a challenge, because, everything in racing happens so fast. I mean, we're going 180, 190 miles per hour, so like everything's moving like so fast, that you got to have a high level of concentration. So with me having autism, I had a tremendous advantage there. Um, I will say, I think like at least the challenges, I think if anything, it was just so small. Like I think it's just had one time where, I made my first ever NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series start at a track in St. Louis, Missouri called Gateway, and we were making a pit stop during the race, and it's my very first race. So at the end of the day, like I had to just make sure like I was there at the finish, not tear the truck up or anything. So we make a pit stop, and I got the truck revving ready to go. And then next thing you know, like, I try to take off and I think I'm all good. And then I stall the thing, and it's just like in my own mind, like I wanted to be so upset with myself, because it's like it's such a simple thing, and like I'm a pro, it's something I should not do, things in that nature. I'm just glad nobody caught that on TV though. That would have been even more embarrassing, but I think like in moments like that, I mean, because like yeah, you have realistic expectations in terms of like how you're gonna go into races, because like in this case, fact that the whole goal was just to try and finish the race, like I had to just make sure I stay incredibly calm, knowing that like I have a team behind me that's gonna do whatever they can to, help get me out there, and eventually we were able to get the truck back out there. And, I finished 21st that night. So I could have gotten the top 20, but it's just I always think to like, man, if I could have just not stalled a truck, like we would have definitely been top 20 for sure, especially with how the end of that race goes. I mean, there was, drivers getting into one another, letting it going because it's like it's go time. They're trying to go for the win, right? And we were able to avoid all that, and man, we just came one spot short of just my first ever top 20 finish in a my first ever truck race, so it was just one of those moments where it's just like, yeah, I mean, you take what you can in terms of things you did well and things that you didn't do well, and think of like what things can I do to improve that, so those are one of those moments.
You're Eileen, he's not our first NASCAR driver, right? Or we've had at least one or two other professional drivers, right?
Yeah, the other driver who's also on the spectrum, right? Because everyone on our podcast is on the spectrum. But he's not. He wasn't in NASCAR. It was in the Mazda series. Yeah, Austin Varco is his name. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
You know
him.
Austin?
Yeah, him, and then there's another one in there as well with Bobby Trunley. He does like the sports car things in Europe as well. In the UK, supposedly. I remember I met him when we were living in the COVID world, COVID year 2020, and they invited me to this team that that was a sports cars team where it was full of like, disability passionate, engineers and drivers. They invited me to be part of this virtual 24 hours of Le Mans that we were going to participate in, and that's when I met Austin and the rest of the folks. And just I was glad to know that, like, I'm not the only one in the racing world with autism that's going out there to make a difference. There's guys like, Austin out there, who's getting it done on the track, so it was great to be involved with those guys.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I was just thinking, like, do you think that there's, um, any correlation, or just that there's, hey, if 2% of the world has autism, that, hey, it's bound that, there's probably some NASCAR drivers who do, right? So, or some drivers, right? So probably everywhere we look, just some are more public facing than others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great to see when there's other people related to you that's going out there and trying to be able to accomplish something, be successful at something as you are, even if it's in like a different form of racing. Yet, like they're living their dreams and, having fun doing it. And that's what it's all about. It's just find something that you're passionate about and have fun doing it, because if not, like, why do it in the first place? So it's nice to see guys like Austin, out there hitting it on the track.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I'm glad to see you guys. As someone who loves racing, it's good to see the next generation being so passionate about advocacy. Speaking of, I know you're very passionate about being an autism advocate and helping other kids and, honestly, maybe adults who want to like fulfill their dream and all of that. And I'm wondering if you've had any experience with how divided the autism community can be online. Like, did you face any criticism? Have you seen any of the like controversies? And if so, how do you feel about it?
I don't think there was much criticism or much division in terms of like, what people would say about me. Like, I think it was more heartwarming. People found it like inspiring and something unique and intriguing, and I get a lot of fans that were supportive of that, like particularly through social media. Like I got many followers who, are really every parent that follows me that have some connection with autism, like, their son or daughter, has autism, or like they know a friend, or, like another family member of theirs that has autism, and be able to tell me all these stories and things that they're going through. I think in in this one particular case, there was this parent that, reached out to me, that was telling me about, her kid per se, and like how, every year they try to throw a birthday party for him. And yet, the problem was that nobody would show up to his birthday, and so like it made me feel bad for the kid, because you want to have people out there that, support you in big moments like this, especially a birthday, right? And, she had asked me to possibly write a letter to, her son to give him some encouragement. But then, like, she also followed up with, asking me if I wanted to be able to call the kid, like FaceTime him, just so like, I can chat with him, and just have some fun with him, and so I took it upon myself to make sure that I made her son stay, especially on her birthday, and I did. And I mean, it's just, he was probably 8 or 9 years old at the time. And it's just hearing what he had to go through. And it's just like, I just wanted to make that kid happy, someone who's related to me with autism. It was important that, like, I gave that kid hope, I gave him some positive encouragement, to continue moving forward, and let him and remind him that, like, these moments are moments that you should enjoy, that you should remember for a long time, and so like I always try to, be able to connect with those folks and just to help them understand that there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and that we can all share this world just like everybody else, and be able to make a positive impact on society. It doesn't matter, if we have autism, and no matter how different we are, that we can be successful at anything that we try to set our mind to, and it's just a matter of like finding what exactly that is, and just, push to achieve your dream. So, it's just something that, like, I feel like it's my responsibility to remind people that all the time, to just never give up, and just, live life to the fullest with autism. Understand that it's a strength, not a weakness.
That's so kind of you. I love that you did that for that kid. I'm sure it meant the world to him. So yeah. It's really good. So you said that autism is a strength for you. What's your favorite part of being a NASCAR driver? Do you think your autism is helping you in any way?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that the one thing I enjoy about racing is that I get to go fast. Like I always felt like as a kid, I wanted to be good and fast at something. And, racing was just one way of like helping me achieve that. I mean, again, it's just like, while normal people can be interested in so many things, with autism, it's just different. It's like whatever catches our eye, it stays there. We stay locked in on whatever that we get interested in, and that we want to learn more about it, and to be a part of it, right? And so with me having autism, I just found racing as something that could just keep my interest up. And then especially when I'm in the race car, I never think of anything else. I'm just laser focused on, making sure I go out there and get the job done, understand what exactly I need to do, and understand what moves I'm going to make during races from start to finish, so it's just having that kind of ability that, autism has, so it really does help me with racing.
So one of the things that I'm familiar with too is that there are lots of people with autism who don't drive, who maybe it's harder to drive. For you, it's, it's what you're good at, what you excel at. So do you have any thoughts on maybe why, so many individuals with autism either don't drive, it's harder to drive, they drive later, and maybe are there some things they can do to help overcome that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, to me, because like I started driving at a young age, it was just a smooth, easy transition for me, so I kind of knew, how exactly to drive. It was just a matter of just like staying in control. And I think with when it comes to driving cars, it's just one of those things that, yeah, it's in something you see in everyday life, but it's one that really you can't mess around. It's like there's a risk for things to happen, like somebody could get hurt in a crash, some things could happen in a car, things of that nature, and I think like for people with autism, I think it's just, I think mainly what they need to just learn about driving is just being able to try to stay within your control and just to relax for a little bit. Like I think with driving, it can be something that like it may scare some people or make things stressful, because it's like, you want to make sure you're doing everything right. You want to make sure you're protecting yourself and others, so I would say the main thing is just to make sure you stay in control and just relax, like go to the driving school and just make sure you listen to every word the instructor tells you to do, and just like practice it like all the time, every day, as many hours as possible, so that eventually that whatever is uncomfortable to you about driving becomes comfortable, and then you can be able to relax and, be able to go where you want to go without having that level of stress or scare that something might happen, that you believe that, hey, I can drive a car, I can believe I can, drive this car, at a level in which everybody else does on the road, so it's just that repetition, that practice, and just making sure you stay controlling yourself and just relax. And, from there, it should be able to help, those people with autism that, struggle with trying to learn how to drive, is the advice I would give.
It's so hard to relax. I mean, I remember when I was younger and I was trying to get my license in France, everyone had their license. And there's something I struggled with so much. Is in France, we have a lot of pigeons. Is that how you say it? Like those birds. And I would stop the car to let them cross the street because I was so scared I was gonna run over them, right? And the driving instructor, like sitting next to me, would always like go crazy. He was like, no, they're gonna fly away. You can't just stop the car because that's so dangerous with the people like behind you, And I've noticed like even here in the US, it's not so much birds, but like squirrels. They're like everywhere around me.
Oh yeah, we get a lot of squirrels around
so
here
hard.
all the time. Yeah.
It's so hard not to like just like slam on the brake, but I know it's dangerous. But to me, like that was one of the hardest thing, like to just learn like it's okay, the birds are gonna fly away. Just like relax, it's gonna happen. Don't like brake unexpectedly, I don't do that anymore, but it's hard. So yeah, don't worry, people, if you're listening, the birds will fly away, hopefully, and the squirrels too. Well, they're not gonna fly, but
although I've heard squirrels fly before, and yet I still don't believe that theory, because I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, some of them have like wings are like bats. Yeah, I've heard of those. I'm gonna ask you some quick fire questions now. You basically just tell me the first answer that comes to your mind. But right before, I want you to tell people where they can find you on social media, and if there's anything you want to promote, or like it's totally open for self-promotion right now.
Yeah, so for people who want to follow me, you can follow me on all social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just go to Armani Williams or Team Armani Racing there. Or if you want to know a little more about me, about my racing and what I do for autism, go to www.teamarmaniracing.com, and you'll find more bio about me, as well as like, the things we do to help give back to the autism community with like my foundation with Race for Autism, and just things that we do in the community to, help create awareness, inclusion, and hope for autism, so please be able to check out all those things out.
Super. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm sure you'll get some follows from this. Okay, before we go, I want to ask you those quick fire questions. You just tell me the first answer that comes to your mind.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Favorite car?
Mustang.
would you drive a French car if your life depended on it?
I mean, hey, if I was trying to get out of somewhere and I was looking for a car, if it has to be a French car, I'll take it. Even if I'm not familiar with it, I'll be able to figure out how to make it work. So.
I may
Quite
add some of
philosophical.
these questions before Eileen has a chance to look at them.
Yeah,
You don't say.
I've seen like the Alfa Romeos, the Ferraris.
Hey, that's an Italian car. Do not mix those two. Do not do that. I'm an Alfa Romeo fan. You can't do that to me.
My bad.
Yeah, thank you.
How about your favorite food?
Steak.
Solid answer. Favorite music to pump you up before a race?
Rock music.
Favorite band or singer?
Oh boy. I've listened to a lot. I will say the one band that will pump me up the most is a band called Breaking Benjamin. Yeah, I mean they had some good songs from back in the day when I was a child, you know, and I always loved listening to them, like because they would always create a lot of great songs back then. So I would listen to that band sometimes just to get me fired up in some way.
And your favorite Fast and Furious movie, if you've seen them?
Oh yeah, I've seen a ton. I can't remember which Fast and Furious was, but it's there's this scene that happens in the end where it's like, you know, Vin Diesel is gonna go out for a drive, and I think, you know, a car pulls up next to him, and it's golly, I know his name, but I can't figure out Chris something, right? And because I think like the year before he passed away due to a car accident, you know, and they show that scene with him driving his car next to him, you know. I think it was like Fast and Furious 7 or 8, you know, like, so that right somewhere around there, that's my favorite Fast and Furious movie. I love that movie.
Well, Armani, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so great speaking with you.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I appreciate you having me on. This was fun. I enjoyed it.